It's showtime, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Do not know where you're joining from, but I will say that I sincerely appreciate you being here. We're talking about something today that is not going to be something that vegans love, which is called TOFU. We're actually talking about the top of funnel. So TOFU is an acronym. Don't ask me why they landed on that. But top of funnel is how we ultimately excite, engage, spark curiosity with your audience. Before I get started into the content, I do want to apologize in advance. This was intended to be a two-man show, but unfortunately, Connor had some unforeseen health stuff that cropped up, so he will not be able to make it. We do wish him well. Thoughts and prayers, of course. But you do have me. I will hopefully do double duty and jump in as best as I can. Good news is we've been in lockstep with each other on all the slides leading in. And so his examples I'll be bringing to life. Any questions towards the end? We'll have a Q&A session. We will send this out. This will be recorded. So if you weren't able to make it live or you have to jump or you're busy, you can only stay for 20, 30 minutes, completely fine. We'll share out links. We'll have it in case you missed it post, and we will go into detail about this. I am particularly excited about this topic, partially because it's something that I run into challenges all the time. Our clients lean in and say, listen, Brian, I don't want to focus on top of funnel because awareness is just not something we can afford to do right now. We need sales, we need leads, we need to convert. And that's a dialogue that I hear and I completely empathize with. But the argument that I will hopefully be presenting today, almost like an opening statement in the courtroom, is that without top of funnel and investment in awareness, you will have a much lower propensity to convert at bottom of funnel, and to get people interested and intrigued and to build trust with you is a very difficult foray. So that's the argument I'll be trying to prove today. And in addition to that, going into the overview, I will explain it. I mentioned funnels, I mentioned buzzwords. For individuals that are joining as really sophisticated marketers, hopefully you will gravitate towards some of the anecdotes and stories that will excite you. If you're brand new, if this is a 101, if you're early stage and saying, Brian, tell me about a funnel, I'm a marketer and never really understood it, that's completely fine. I will go into an overview, describe it, visualize it, give you guys examples. And then I'll jump into why you actually can't afford to do it. So part of this opening argument is why, if you're a C-suite executive and you're in the boardroom and you're pushing back against this and you're finding reasons to refute this, hopefully I will be able to kind of convert your mind, because we're in an era now in 2025 where we are hyper digital. And what hyper digital gives us the ability to do is 20 years ago, typically large scale ad agencies, creative agencies would spend $100,000 on the big idea. They would come up with a 360 campaign strategy. And that big idea typically tapped into the market and it would come up with one key insight. And then from that one key insight, they would say, this is our audience. This is our ICP, ideal customer profile. And from that idea, we're now going to go all in and we're going to build out a series of assets. And everything was led to that one big video or that one key set of billboards or out of home ads, right? And if it was a multi-channel campaign, it hit various things. But that was an era 20 years ago where you invest $100,000 in that one big idea. Now we live in a market where you can spend fractions of dollars on small micro elements of that idea. So once you identify the ICP and once you identify who you want to go after, now you could test a series of messages and you could understand what's garnering value. Okay, so now knowing that we live in a different era, we also live in an era where there's so much tools, platform, and tech, even with first-party cookies going away in a lot of our search habits. We have so many tools to understand what search behavior looks like. We also have so many tools to understand what web behavior looks like. And so things like Lucky Orange, Crazy Egg, Hotjar, you can understand a heat map. You can understand where someone's clicking on your website and having a rage click and getting lost in translation. So I say all this to say, top of funnel is so important because this is our chance to connect with an audience and really understand their pain points and pain relievers. So then after getting into why you can't afford not to do it, we'll talk about why those executives might be failing to do it and how it relates to the tactics we have. And then we'll jump into 5 key top of funnel tactics to shorten the sales cycle. Our goal as an agency, my personal goal is, how do you get individuals from open to close faster? Sales cycle is a very difficult thing. When you're talking to insurance, when you're talking to global enterprises, some sales cycles can be upwards of 2.5 to 3 years. You think about that, okay? Just put that into conceptual thought. You open up a conversation in 2023, that conversation and that's full sales cycle might not close till 2026. So what really matters there? What matters is you have to control that funnel super intelligently. You have to be really mindful of your spend. After we get through that stuff, then we'll go into Q&A. And hopefully by the end of Q&A, you guys will have questions, actionable things that I can help solve. So getting in, I mentioned visualizing the funnel. At the very top of the funnel, the very, very top. Okay, if you think about going into changing your oil and you're pouring motor oil into the engine, think about how a funnel works. It takes a lot down to a little and gets to a really precise point. The precise point at the bottom of the funnel is purchase. This is when someone's going to decide to spend some coin, significantly connect, and say, I'm going to invest in you guys. And then after purchase, the funnel, we often talk about it as a bow tie. After purchase, you then want to go back to nurture and you want to make sure that you help them through the cycle. But we're not worried about any of that. We'll get to that in future webinars. Today, we're talking about the top. Now, the top is at the first is all about awareness. Awareness is at the basic level. Do people know who you are? Do they have any reason to believe? Do they have any reason to buy? And it's not just I'm aware of the logo or I'm aware of what they do at a high level. It's really, if you do top of funnel really well, it's getting down to the why and your essence, because you're ultimately building a tribe. So marketing and branding, as we covered in Primal branding, there is 7 key pillars to that. You need all 7. But at the end of the day, it's primal. It's very connected and it's emotional. And the reason being is because you want to go after the people, they call it your ideal customer profile or your ICP. You want to go after the people that believe in what you believe in because they're going to be your biggest evangelists. And so at the top of the funnel, first you're going awareness, then it leads down to interest. After they know who you are, do they have any interest in getting to know you further? Do they have any interest in buying from you? And then from interest, you continue to go down to consideration. From consideration, that's when someone really says, hey, I'm looking at a couple vendors to deliver the service and I'm actually considering them. And then you show intent. Is there intent to lean towards one versus the other? So a really good marketeer or a really good salesperson is going to understand that there are intent or buying signals during the sales process. And once you feel those, that's when you know that you really need to lean in and help nurture them through the middle of the funnel. So the top, we're inspiring possibilities and sparking curiosity. As we go down to the middle of the funnel around interest and consideration, this is how we turn interest into intent. And at the bottom of the funnel, this is where we empower decisions and drive action. This is ultimately when you want to take someone through and instill the confidence in them to know that they're making the right decision. The beautiful thing now is I mentioned tools and tech and digital just a few moments ago. We have tools now in place like Zoom Info, like Demandbase, like Breeze Copilot from HubSpot. And those are able to give us active intent signals based on someone coming to your site. We also can learn a lot about that individual through maybe the domain they're logged in, persistent ID based on their search habits. The more you can learn from someone up front, the more you can curate and personalize your content. So one of the things we really like to do when we're thinking about top of funnel awareness, if we're putting out signals to the market around pain points and pain relief and how we can solve those challenges, you want to make sure that if someone then sees that signal and comes to your site, you're able to personalize content based on who they are. So like I said, there's tools in place to do that. But at the end of the day, every conversation we're going to have today is all about how do you develop that reason to believe. Everybody has pain points in their life, whether it's business, personal, whatever it is. Your goal as a business, whether it's a service provider, whether it's a product provider, you want to solve pain. In addition to that, not a lot of people understand what they might have pain with until you showcase it for them in a really visual way. So that's the power of content as well, is if you can be a business that identifies the solution long before people even realize they have a problem, that's where you're going to generate interest and awareness. I will give you an easy example right at the top. When you think about red light therapy, cryotherapy, cold plunge, sauna, steam room, things like that, these are things that most people are not waking up in the morning and going, oh, I have a sore elbow. I should probably go get me some red light therapy. Oh, my body feels a little bit stiff. I've been carrying a lot of stress. Let me go in and I want to go do some cryotherapy or cold plunge therapy. That's not normally the connection. Now, unless you're a wellness expert and you know that those things deliver that, maybe that's part of your normal routine. Why I bring those up is because now there is a tremendous amount of rage and demand that's going on into this because podcasters are doing things called life hacks. And podcasters are coming out and now talking about here's the toolkit that you can be the greatest entrepreneur, the greatest business owner, the greatest executive, the greatest parent, right? How do I juggle life? And so they're talking about these things because they're looking at it and saying, based on all these life hacks, you've now maybe heard of this on a podcast. You now go onto social media, you see some following on Instagram, you'll see some visuals, and then you'll then take a step to go, the hell is red light therapy? And that's where the awareness phase starts. Because now once you're aware of a concept and you have just awareness, generally speaking, into a given area, now the most expensive or mid-tier red light therapy, whether it's a bed, whether it's a personal light, whether it's through your house or a service provider, now that is going to be the things that those who win in search are going to drive you to the right place. So think about that at the very top of the funnel. You might not be aware of something, but once you start being aware of the problem and then the solution, then you'll start to drive consideration and intent for the folks that actually do it and offer it. And so, I call that the Amazon effect. The Amazon effect has now happened where they were so obsessed in customer service that you expect a package on your doorstep within hours. If you actually think about that for a second, I'm going to click a button. I'm going to look up a product. I'm going to evaluate that product. I'm going to see if it's fulfilled by Amazon or independent private seller. I'm going to read some reviews. I'm going to make a buying decision very quickly. And then I want that product to be on my doorstep within hours or even a day. And Amazon Prime is a guarantee of that, included in free. Okay. I tell you that because people are now exposed to this. And so you have to think about your brand and your product, because the Amazon effect, it handles the entire funnel from top to bottom. It's generating awareness as you go in. So it's teasing out certain content. It's using its algorithm to recommend other products. That is a commerce experience that if you're a marketer and you look at that end to end, you say to yourself, okay, what triggers do I want to take from the Amazon effect? Because I know that people are conditioned for it now. You know that that's how people buy. Okay, so continuing on, branding impacts the 95% of the market who make up next year's pipeline. What does this mean directly? This means that if you don't invest in pipeline or you don't invest in awareness upfront, so top of funnel awareness, you're going to have a completely dry pipeline next year. There's two different anecdotes that I want you to think about. One anecdote is the bamboo paradox. The bamboo paradox is that bamboo grows typically underground for 3 to 4 years before you'll ever see it pop through the surface. During that 3 to 4 years, once it pops through the surface, you then have an accelerated growth. It can grow up to 90 feet within weeks. So just think about that for a second. It's percolating, it's growing, it's being nurtured underground. And then what happens is once it pops through, you can grow 90 feet within weeks. And that's really the same effect that new business and sales has when it's supported by marketing. Because now marketing, it's responsible for more of the funnel than it ever has been. In the past, marketing was responsible for that very top of the funnel where you had interest and awareness. Awareness and interest. But now marketing is focused on almost the entire pipeline, getting somebody to their final intent phase and their final purchase phase. And why is that, you might say? Well, part of it is because 75% of people, real statistic, by the way, want to manage the entire sales process themselves. This goes for project management software. This goes for payroll software. This goes for tools and tech that you're using, onboarding agencies. You want your sales process to be managed by yourself. The discoverability, the search, the reviews, the testimony, like-minded examples. What I'm finding now is clients and prospects that are coming to us, they're already at the buying phase, but they're not at the buying phase with us. They're at the buying phase and they've gone down to one or two alternatives. And now it's your job to either sell yourself in the deal or sell yourself out of the deal. And so when thinking about the bamboo paradox, you want to make sure that you're growing everything underground and you're creating a very healthy network of content that's out in the wild to talk about who you are, why you matter, who you're connected with, what your credibility is, and ultimately what you do. Because the other side of that is the Netflix effect. And they call it the Netflix hit show effect. And so what this is, for anybody that has Netflix, I was one of the OGs who used to have the DVDs, and I got really early stage onto the streaming platform. Netflix used to be $3 a month when it first started. I now pay $26 a month, and I'm paying for the 4K ultra content. I'm paying for the entire thing. Okay. I've bought into Netflix, but one thing I really appreciate about them is they don't just drop hit shows and great content and hope for the best. The best of content will fail unless you invest the time and money to create demand. And that demand happens through teasers, through trailers, through countdowns, through social media, through information behind the scenes, getting to know the actors. All of this stuff is now put together by Netflix. And from the other streaming giants, you will see in the industry, if you actually look this up, you will see that Netflix is kind of the beacon. They've set the tone in this. They've taken the pathway for really successful blockbuster movies and they've applied it to their streaming platform. So now you'll notice that their algorithm, not only is it curated towards you, you have the ability to like or ultra like something, and all you're doing is signaling to Netflix what type of content you like. But you're also now seeing in your window of previews, the majority of those previews are things that are not out yet. You'll see coming soon, or you'll see drops 3 weeks. You'll get notified via email. So they're looking across the board. And despite the fact that you know who Netflix is and you have it and you subscribe, still think about every single show and movie that drops as a unique mini funnel, and they're doing it better than anybody. So then process that in your mind and say, okay, I might have the greatest product or service in the world, but if people don't know what's coming and don't know where I am, how are they ever going to purchase it? Okay, so you can't afford TOFU marketing. I'm going to read this real quick because I often find it hard when I'm presenting and somebody puts a lot of words on the slide. When you activate awareness and curiosity, your top of funnel marketing acts like a signal fire, strategically placed to send a clear, unmistakable message to your audience. Just as ancient civilizations lit fires to communicate over long distances, your marketing efforts need to attract the right audience at the right time to be effective. I couldn't agree with this message more. And the signal that we're trying to put out has to be a combined effort on things, because we know individuals are going to take the next pathway in their search. We know that individuals are going to consume content. They're going to be scrolling. They're going to be looking at what's happening out in the wild. So we have to set that signal fire in a very compelling way, because we chose to be a HubSpot partner almost 4 years ago now. And the reason being is because HubSpot is a tool. It's a CRM by trade with multiple hubs across sales, marketing, service, operations, and content. They're layering in AI. They're doing a lot of really amazing stuff, but their philosophy has never changed since the start of the company. And their philosophy has always been about inbound marketing to complement outbound marketing. And so the statistic we see that inbound marketing generates 3 times more interest and 62% lower cost than outbound tactics. So let's put that into perspective, the difference between inbound and outbound. So outbound is having sales reps, it's having potentially cold outreach, AI platforms, launching emails out to individuals. It is picking up the phones and cold calling. It's finding ways to generate and drum up business. Okay. Those are all outbound tactics. Inbound tactics are things that we're going to talk about today. So we'll talk about blogging. We'll talk about social media. We'll talk about webinars. We'll talk about video content, things that we can do to be out in the wild, following the process of if you build it, they will come. Inbound marketing started all around blogging. Okay. If you blog and create content that solves a challenge or answers a question, individuals will then go ahead and identify that. They will get exposed to your brand. They'll land on your website. They'll go ahead and learn and consume. Inbound has become so much more, because now inbound is, how do I win as being the best designed? How do I win an inbound by being potentially the noisiest or most disruptive? How do I use inbound marketing to truly solve a problem and let people know who we are? You're seeing a lot more behind the scenes, a lot more kind of quirky, organic, raw videos, because people don't want to be sold to on things that feel artificial or feel misleading. People need and crave authenticity more than ever. So we're in an era now where AI is proliferated to the point where you have messages everywhere, to the point where we're getting into a flavor. I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but you could look at a post and you could see certain emojis or certain formatting or certain elements, and you go, that's ChatGPT. And there's this fun game that I play where I read a paragraph in a blog post, and if it feels even slightly artificial, I'll snag the paragraph and I'll drop it and be like, can you identify that this was written and sourced by you, ChatGPT? And so I tend to vibe in that direction simply because people crave authenticity more than ever now, and we have to deliver it. And that comes with marketing. And this goes for property management software. This goes for payroll software. This goes for anything. If you're selling an enterprise technical product, more than ever, you have to give exposure into who lives behind the platform in tech. What is the team and the support going to be? What are the ways that you can apply it to your team? I think about property managers, and we're currently searching and talking to and looking at a company called Rentvine. It's a really interesting proposition, and it's a phenomenal platform. And you think about the buyer's journey of somebody that's managing a property, right? Let's say you have 1,000 units. Those are condos, those are apartments, whatever it is. And you're a property manager. Your number one responsibility is to make sure those tenants are happy, they're healthy, and they're paying their rent. Software that layers onto that to make sure you're accounting for things properly, that you're able to accept rental payments, that you're able to follow up to make sure if someone's late with their rental payment or if their door's not fixed or there's lock challenges. You think about that in a grand scheme of things. Property management is a very complex offering. You don't have time to really go ahead and look for an alternative. But if you were on LinkedIn and you saw a visually arresting post that just said, having trouble collecting rental checks on time as a property manager, you saw another post that said, what if you can collect rental payments with no ACH fees to the end user? These are two offerings that Renfine has and offers in their product and platform. This is something that's now going to peak up and get your interest and say, you know what, I should probably look into this because it's actually difficult in my schedule. Why that example matters is because bottom funnel, the response rate that happened cold outreach versus warm outreach, there's a substantial difference. In cold outreach, you're probably getting a 1% success rate. And that's if your email is tailored, curated, written to perfection, taps into the pain point, and really just maybe you caught someone on a lucky day where they saw your email and they go, you know what? Let me talk to this individual. Let me hear what they have to say. But you're 2 to 3 times stronger and more powerful if you have warm outreach. And where does warm outreach come? Well, it comes with a foundation of awareness, first of all, and credibility. It also maybe connects with a consumer that maybe commented on one of your posts or liked one of your posts and now has that brand recall. So going back to kind of 4 webinars ago, I talked about in the US, it takes 12 impressions. In Europe, it takes 17 impressions to develop brand recall. It's a lot of impressions to be able to get into someone's mind. So we think about neurons that fire together, wire together. We want to be able to create as many neurons as possible to drive that. So continuing on. So why are C-level executives not investing in top of funnel? There's a very strong, compelling answer for that. They don't want to spend money on things that they can't directly see return. And I get it. I get it. Every dollar counts. You don't want to be in the boardroom saying, oh, well, why am I posting on social media? I don't care. Social media, I don't need awareness. That is the most fundamentally flawed statement that you could ever make. Because think about it like this. You go into a restaurant and that restaurant's completely empty. Maybe you're the adventurous tourist who doesn't want noise and doesn't want a busy restaurant. But the majority of time when you walk by and it's an empty restaurant, you're like, what's wrong with that? You're immediately going to Google to read the reviews. And if they got even a less than 4-star review, you're like, on to the next. It's the same reason why in Manhattan or other major cities that outside of a club, they form a line. And so you're waiting in line, you're in the queue and you're like, oh, there's a line, man, it's such a good place. You get in, the entire dance floor is empty. The place is relatively empty. They were creating false demand, okay? The way you create real demand is by creating that queue or line effect or interest up front. And I just think that awareness is so much lower cost. You have the ability to create such a bigger reach and you can control the narrative. So why individuals are not investing in this is because they're so focused on attribution and they want to convert at the end of the funnel to say, okay, I had this outreach, this individual connected and they purchased. I'm able to tie that to revenue. But what we do is we come back and say, okay, if you're not willing to invest in that, why don't you let us build you the entire funnel top to bottom so we can track it, so we know all the various tactics you're doing, whether it's paid search, whether it's SEO, whether it's content creation, content strategy, whether you have a large scale video and campaign you're running, all these channels now are going to drive awareness here and they're going to take people through the middle into the bottom of the funnel. And if we can track all those signals, and now you can visualize as we talk about that funnel, if I can measure awareness and say, hey, we put this amount of money in and we're generating this amount of intent from that, and I could talk about the ROI that it's led to and said, hey, after a period of time, the attribution connects back to this. Now we're looking at high quality leads. And now we're back to that number of cold outreach versus warm outreach. So it's essential. There's really no way around it, unfortunately. Before we get into this, I want to go back to this for one other second. The other reason why you have to focus on awareness is because you cannot be confident that individuals are going to be able to do their own labor on finding out more about you. So what I mean by that is with Grok, Perplexity, ChatGPT, there is AI solutions now where individuals are not just going to Google first. They have a question or they want background, they're getting insight from generative AI. Generative AI is just taking an amalgamation of everything that exists already. So if you're not investing in things at top of funnel for awareness, and you're not tying into your own credibility or solving pain points or being educational, and you're just rushing to the bottom of the funnel, you're not going to be able to be considered when individuals are putting their first proxy out with Gen AI. You're also not going to be able to dominate search in a way that you think you might want to. It's really fascinating to me as well, because we live in this instant gratification economy where people don't also want to put in the legwork for research. One interesting story that I recently came across is with the JFK assassination. There's so many conspiracy theories about this. And this is back from the 60s. So now almost 70 years later, the files were released from clandestine services. And people were just demanding after all this time. I need to see the files, So the files are released, and people weren't even reading through the content to see what they could find or make connections. They were putting them into Grok or Perplexity or ChatGPT and saying, please just summarize these for me and then validate my argument. That's not a good place to be, because if you connect that back to product or services, that means individuals have a perception in their mind. And the only way to change that perception is through your efforts in marketing. And so now let's get into 5 tactics for TOFU marketing. So SEO, blogging, social media, video marketing, and webinars. SEO is something that right off the clip, people hear these letters and they glaze over. The amount of conversations that I have about SEO where people are like, listen, I run an enterprise global company. We have $500 million in revenue. I don't care about SEO. It's not on my priority set. And that's a hard mentality. And I understand where this comes from. I think this comes from partially because it's nebulous. It's really hard to track in some cases, the efforts that are happening. But if you search anything on SEO, you'll understand that backlinks are very important. Backlinks are an external source linking back to your original content. Cross-linking within your own site to make sure you have educational content linked to product offering and commercial offering, super important. Understanding the keywords that you want to go after, the keywords that you want to buy, focus, nurture, create content, all that's very important. But it's then tough to look at SEO and say, okay, if I invest X amount of dollars, what does that net out? My return question to that would be, what's the impact if you don't? How many times have you been searching online and ever, unless you were looking at videos or images, when have you ever gone to page 6 on Google? Typically it's page 1 and 2. And now when you search on Google now, there is Gemini typically has an output. So it has an AI output. You're not even getting to organic search on the top of your screen. And so when someone scrolls past that and they take the snippet and they take the Google My Business information, once you get into the organic search rankings after ads, it's a very small bit of real estate before someone's going to get fatigued. SEO really matters because it allows you to go after the keywords that you deem important. So it's not about going after the high monthly search volume, going into a saturated space and trying to win. No, it's about finding ways to win in the categories that tie to your niche. And so why I'm bringing this up is SEO as a top of funnel tactic has to tie to your value propositions. And it has to be back to that pain point, pain relief. Number 2 is blogging. Blogging gets a lot of hate because the immediate perception is, well, people don't read blogs anymore. Generally speaking, there's truth to that. But if you were a great blogging engine or you're a great company or agency that puts out amazing educational content, people will be finding it through search. So SEO drives blogging, but blogging needs to not be overinflated, needs to be stuffed with keywords. It needs to be short, snackable. And if it is long form, it's got to provide a ton of value. But when blogs feel more like a knowledge base and solve a challenge, that's when you're going to find elements, not only to delight customers, but also drive awareness of your brand. Number 3, social media. The way we're going to talk about it today is not in the general sphere of, hey, you need a profile, you need information, you need content. No. We're talking about social media in the context of what are the best tactics for top of funnel awareness and what are the ones that we find work the best. And ultimately talking at a local or regional or global level. Video marketing is another. Video is just super engaging. Why? Because it transports you into the room. The examples I like to talk about video marketing is how much podcasting has changed once individuals started vlogging and putting themselves on video. Once we saw certain podcasters develop really, really high-end video work and allowed individuals into the room to connect and see who they were and almost feel like they were hanging out, you saw massive growth in terms of that industry and that connection point. And it makes you feel like you know that person. So there's dangers to it. But the reality is, once that podcaster that you feel like you connect with and you're sitting in the room with virtually, when they recommend a product or they endorse a product, you're running to the store and you're getting it. You're buying it almost immediately. And you're not doing it because of the promo code. You're doing it because it's tied to credibility and trust. So remember, back to the top of the funnel where we talk about awareness, sparking curiosity. And last is webinars. We're on one right now. Webinars are a key facet because webinars give you the chance to connect with new audiences that might discover you and say, hey, I've been wanting to learn about that topic for a while. And they attend. And that's how they get exposed to you. I think a lot of people get webinars wrong because they treat it like a pitch and they come in and they try to sell you a bunch of stuff. It's about being useful. So when you think of top of funnel marketing content, the tip that I can give everybody is be useful. So SEO. I want to tell a story about SEO in the context of one of the clients that we've supported for a handful of years now. And it's one of the most powerful stories and anecdotes that I've ever been a part of, really, when it comes to SEO. I know that sounds hyperbolic and dramatic, but it's the truth. So we've been working with a global payroll company, previously called Amidas, but now we work with UKG. And UKG is one of the largest human capital management suites in the world, okay? Prolific company, multiple different service offerings. UKG acquired Amidas just about a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And when we were working with Amidas originally, they were a global payroll provider that were the only ones able to do what they did. They can give payroll administrators and executives one unified dashboard view. So think of all of your given payrolls at the regional and local level in one unified view. And you can look at completion percentages. You can look at errors, warnings, observations. It was a very, very valuable platform. When we started working with them, their awareness levels were low. Dublin, Ireland-based company, had an office in the US, had an office in Eastern Europe. And at the time, they were in rapid stages of growth, okay? Number one tactic that we were focused on with them was, how do we complement paid search and SEO with them? The issue is that they were in global payroll. Global payroll is an educational and a commercial-driven set of keywords, okay? So when you think about global payroll, it's super saturated. It's a lot of companies that offer various things. Now, remember back to what I said. They're the only ones that can offer this one niche and one offering. Granted, they did a lot of other great things. They had robotic processing, they used machine learning, et cetera, but this was their claim to fame and differentiator. And what they were aspiring to do is they were trying to create a scenario called touchless payroll. They wanted payroll administrators to not have manual intervention. They wanted to take payroll cycle times from 14 days of prep down to 3 or 4 days of prep at max, and be able to have significantly less errors because you don't want issues paying your employees. It's a big one. And so touchless payroll kept coming up. We were working on SEO for them, and we built all these key pillars and tributaries around how do we ladder up to global payroll? Do we want to focus on compliance, HCM integration, et cetera? And I had this epiphany moment where I said, well, touchless payroll doesn't mean anything. There's no monthly search volume. 0 people are typing that into Google and searching for it. But then it struck me and I said, okay, if ADP is a global juggernaut and spending a ton of money, how do we then outfox and outcompete? Well, why don't we generate demand focused on our value propositions? So what we did is we started building blog content on touchless payroll. We invented the keyword, okay? And what I mean by we invented the keyword is when you write a blog post on touchless payroll as a philosophy, why it works, why it matters, how it connects to the platform, what features are connected to it, you're now starting to tie and signal to Google and say, hey, the Google gods, come to me. Touchless payroll means this for these reasons in this capacity. And by the way, it's tied to global payroll. And by the way, it's tied to what we do. And by the way, it's tied to Amidas. So now that signal to Google, we start to put out. Okay. Now, surely Google would say, all right, if you're searching for touchless payroll, we're going to go ahead and rank this number 1 because it's the most immersive, quantifiable bit. But then we didn't stop there. We did 2 more blog posts. And then from those 2 more blog posts, we helped Amidas land their next round of funding. So they got a big infusion of cash. So what did we do? We put out a press release, and that press release curated the idea of touchless payroll. We're spearheading an industry. So we took a very exciting announcement of this big infusion of cash investment to grow. And we said, well, let's make it about their 2 big drivers, touchless payroll and perpetual validation, 2 keywords that we then invented. And when I say invented, I mean, these are things that they uniquely owned. So now we have press release, we have 3 blog posts. We then started creating video content informing on touchless payroll, and we had a whole video that was connected to it. So we're leaning in. We're leaning in. And you might be hearing this going, well, Brian, how do you know that this is even going to work? Well, then what happened was that is a value proposition that we knew the ideal customer profile wanted. That's number one. So we knew that there was demand for it. We knew that there'd be willingness to buy. But then what we started seeing is that ADP and Papaya were working on SEO and paid search, and they were finding when they were doing their high-level scans that Touchless Payroll and perpetual validation was connected to global payroll, and it was a keyword that was now generating 20 to 30 monthly search volumes. So they started buying it. But the good news is that when we went to, and you can search Touchless Payroll, still to this day, by the way, is you'd see paid search, and that we were watching ADP and Papaya now start to come after this. We were watching them start to create content. And we started seeing all this associative content because we sparked and created interest, curiosity, and demand. And then people started following us. So why SEO is so important is SEO is not the conventional nebulous, let's get backlinks, let's do all this. No, SEO, when done right, and you understand truly what makes you special, when you have an agency that understands SEO fundamentally and can stay up and connect with AI, et cetera, when you can start using your strategy that way, I mean, the sky's the limit. Blogging is the other side of that. So you saw how with Touchless Payroll, this now connects. I would highly encourage individuals, don't put all of your eggs in one basket of blogging and hope for the best. No, blogging is a complement to shape keywords and content clouds on Google to drive traffic, which then allows us to understand, okay, if it's a triple win, and it increases organic traffic and improves website authority and it increases top of funnel, well, then why would you not do it? Well, it could get expensive. You want to have great writers. You want to have great unique thought. I would venture a guess to say that individuals that are blogging and over-investing blogging are typically not complementing that with really great SEO practices. Those two things go hand in hand. If you just focus on SEO and blogging and move from navigational or informational keywords to what are called commercial keywords, I'm willing to bet my wardrobe on the fact that you'd be successful. Just those two tactics. But then we get into social. And social is this interesting animal because we now have this rise of TikTok. Everybody wants to be on TikTok. Hang on a second. I'm not even going to get into the controversy of where it's from, who owns it, who's buying it, who's selling it. Like, put all that stuff to the side. You have a very, very, very powerful algorithm in TikTok. They are showing you content that you've expressly generated interest in. Okay, I looked at that, I paused on that, I leaned into that, I commented on that. Your algorithm is going to be so sophisticated that your feed is going to be designed for you. It's taking the Instagram for you Explore tab and putting on steroids. But if your users are not on TikTok and your content is not curated for TikTok, then don't go on it. You don't have to be everywhere. Okay, be somewhere for the folks that need you and want to connect with you. And do you need to be on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram? Do you want to be part of all the metaverse, et cetera? Not necessarily. You need to have a pulse, number one. Number two, you need to be on the platform that you know you can create content in a satisfactory way. And so we lean in heavy with LinkedIn because our content is made for individuals that are in the buying search that need help, for agency services that want to learn and understand things like top of funnel, middle, or bottom of funnel. They want to learn about new tech that's launching, our design reviews and design critiques, all that's designed for LinkedIn, having really powerful conversations there. But then as we're watching individuals, we're also leaning into Instagram because we have a lot of visual case studies that we want to show. But where we're not leaning in is Facebook. We're not leaning in on TikTok. We're not designed for it. Our audience doesn't live there. That's not where we want to send our signal. But what I would articulate with social media is it is a very low cost, high reward platform because you can test a lot of content. We never know what's going to drive something to go viral. But what we do know is when you can put out content to a wide audience, and yeah, maybe the algorithm is suppressing you and maybe folks are not seeing what you're doing at every clip, but the consistency, it allows somebody to go to your profile and very quickly scan your content because people don't dive. They don't do research. They don't dive into something and really cross-check their I's and T's. What they're doing now is they're getting a glimpse. Give me a glimpse. Let me learn as much as I can. Let me read some testimonials. Let me fact check all this. And then I'll talk to your salesperson. So social media is a low-cost, high-scale way to disrupt the market. And it's also a way that someone might glance at you and get that 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 impressions for brand recall. All right, so I know I'm talking fast, but I gotta move even faster because we're running low on time. So let me manage this. Video marketing. I want to just talk about video in the context of If you're creating how-to videos or you're creating behind-the-scenes videos or meeting the team, in my opinion, that is the number one way to drive connection and create what are calling evangelist or rituals or ritualistic behavior with you. If you have a platform or tech and you don't have how-to videos and you don't have any connection to the founder, or you have no connection to the executive team that's kind of getting into this, you're missing out, right? There is a big reason why influencers exist, and influencers have an audience that people connect with them. They begin to trust their opinion and their thoughts. What we're seeing is we're seeing 500,000 hours of YouTube videos uploaded every minute. That is insane. Let me just put that into perspective. 500,000 hours of content every minute on YouTube. If you were to ever think about that, by the way, Google purchased YouTube for $1 billion. That's a deal. That's a steal, actually. But over 90% of people say they discover new brands on YouTube. And why is that? Because YouTube also has a really good recommended for you page. So depending on what you consume, it's all, I'll say this, it is all about understanding what other things your customer is doing and where they are in their search habit. Like omni-channel marketing is a very different definition than it was 10 years ago. Where we are in 2025 now is people have certain habits and we have the ability to profile a lot of their habits. Find out where they are and find out what content that they're searching for, and then create top of funnel awareness for that. But you really have to commit into that. If you're a leader and you're doing that, don't just put out social media for 3 months and go, it's not working. Don't do 4 webinars and go, no one's here. There's a reason for that. It's very hard to get people to try new behaviors. It's very hard for people to identify that there's even a problem. Like the number one element of I forgot the exact words of it, but addiction is admitting that there's a problem. Most people are not even aware that there's a problem in certain things. And that goes for business as well. So we have to be the ones, the shepherds and the Sherpas, to be able to help individuals know where's the pain. The last is webinars. I talk about webinars. You guys are here. Anybody that's attending this knows the value of them. But I talk about them in the context of there's so much AI content that's out in the wild now. And that AI content is just becoming noise. So we have to help individuals cut through the market, and they have to cut through that noise to get substantive things. And if they can meet human beings, they can hear human voice and perspective, it goes a long way. But also webinars allow you to drive a blogging strategy, because now you can take this webinar, you can upload the recording, you can give a transcribe, you could help Google understand that this is the topic that solves this challenge. You also can cut up the webinar into small segments. So I think maybe 12 to 15 key insights are going to come out of this webinar. We'll clip all those up and we'll distribute them. That can become content for our social. And so webinars really matter because you put all this effort into promoting them, preparing for them, launching them, but then they become this really scalable evergreen piece of content. So outcomes, we're nearly on schedule. Appreciate people hanging in for the extra couple of minutes. The outcomes of effective TOFU marketing. So first is you create mental availability for your brand. I mentioned neurons that fire together, wire together. Mental availability is just being aware that it even exists. If you're in a quiet, dark room or in isolation, no one's gonna even know you're there. So we have to be able to create mental availability for people to even be aware, to show interest, and then ultimately go down to consideration. Second, you build authority and credibility in your space. Credibility is key because you want to be the voice that has thought leadership, but also you're demonstrating your ability to deliver by your ability to understand the landscape at large. So authority and credibility goes a long way also because there is power to being the person in the company that individuals look for. And when you get to a point where demand is coming in because maybe you've won an award of, top technology of the year or best small agency of the year or best agency for startups, when you start developing authority and credibility in that space, people are now going to lean in more. The next is you ignite curiosity and people lean in closer. But curiosity is something that we all thrive. I mean, the human element, why we are a species that have evolved as fast as we have is because we have a unique level of emotional curiosity that I don't necessarily know that any other species has. And that curiosity allows individuals to lean in much closer because they want to be a part of it. Next is you catalyze meaningful engagement with prospects. So being a catalyst for meaningful engagements goes back to the stat of 1% success rate on cold outreach, 2.35% or 2.38% on warm outreach. And meaningful engagement means that you're intersecting where they are when they're either in the buying journey or they're in the journey that they want to consume what you're saying. Next is your unique perspective is rewarded. And I would argue that you're rewarded across the board. Google changed their algorithm within months. So 3 months ago, to reward content that sounds as natural language as possible and takes a very unique stance. So this is not pushing controversy. This is saying you're rewarded for unique perspective because no one else is saying and doing the things that you are. So how can you be different? And part of that is really just sticking to what you're good at. Don't try to market everything to everybody. The last one is you provide the spark that inspires further action. And where that comes from, the spark that inspires further action, is maybe that person saw something and just raises an eyebrow, or maybe they scroll, or maybe they just like that post, or maybe they came across a blog because Shopify was putting out content targeted towards entrepreneurs and you were looking for ways to improve commerce. The next action you might take is you might go, well, wait a second, this blog is actually really tight. Maybe that allows you to go to the homepage of that given place. Now you're taking further action to learn more. So a lot of outcomes connected to this. So just in closing, before we get to Q&A, is I definitely want to thank everybody for hanging in there. I know it's a lot of information, but just slowly going back to that visual of what a funnel is, the very top of awareness. It's so, so important because no one wants to be sold to without context. No one wants to be sold to and pressured into a buying decision when they don't feel that it's their idea. One of the key parts of neurolinguistic programming is being able to create language patterns that allow individuals to have their own thought processes, their own ideas. And that's the way you're a very persuasive individual, a very persuasive marketer is building trust because they're allowing small signals to get inside someone's mind and allow them to make the decision. So just ending on this, any leader, any executive that's in the room that's poo-pooing on awareness, you got to think deeper to that because the awareness is the other side of the pendulum that allows people to purchase. It's what gives people the comfort to say yes. Okay, so we pause there and we look at Q&A. So let's see, is there any Q&A that's coming in here? First question, anonymous attendee. Do you think the pressure to show immediate ROI is causing marketers to underinvest in top of funnel? And how do you get execs to buy into a longer game? I appreciate the question very much because I think the pressure to show ROI is higher than it's ever been. And I also think now that it's not only causing marketers, the mandate is coming from clients. Like it's very hard to then lean into a conference room and have a conversation with an executive that's now saying, I hired you to do this. I need more leads now. I'm not investing in that. Do this. It's very hard to show the evidence procedures. It's very hard to kind of combat and battle into the conference room, but it's also very difficult when clients and customers abandon ship where they say this is not working, right? So you have two different elements to this. One, it's pushing marketers for sure to kind of skip through and go right to middle of funnel, creating content that people want to convert. And then like I see companies often investing in kind of AI platforms that help with cold outreach, sending hundreds of emails per week to scrape someone's website, get a message, say, hey, we understand that you love growing brands and building and accelerating. So you should work with us. I could 10x your business. That doesn't work. We've hopefully established the argument in this that it doesn't work. But I think to answer the question, hyper specific, the way that I allow executives to get into the long game is I try to tell 2 or 3 stories around and getting them to help buy into the story. But I try to tell 2 or 3 stories of product journeys that they've had. And I tap into their heartstrings of when they take a business trip and they're going into a new city. Now, normally they might have an executive admin or they might have someone in their life that's helping plan their itinerary. But for the most part, when they're going into a city and they get to a hotel, now it's the experience of got to find a restaurant, got to book meetings, have to connect with someone, where can we have a coffee chat, et cetera. And they're going through the normal buying signals, looking at Google reviews, identifying on Yelp, booking something through Resi. So I try to tap into stories of their lives where awareness really was successful. And then I also talk about things that connect to NCAA March Madness, which is very valid right now in March. Why is that tournament so successful? The buying signals and awareness of this, the conversations that lead into that tournament are so much through January, February, leading into March, that by the time March comes, there's such an insatiable demand to that. So the way that I try to get it is tell stories to executives, but then also if you pair your tactics with marketing, if you can show relevant attribution and really get them to lean in and say, listen, give me a 6 to 8 month runway and I will build relevant reporting to help people attribute throughout that. That's where you can gain confidence because you can say, listen, you're not going to get direct ROI from social media, blogging, webinars, videos, but you are going to get direct ROI when that awareness is tracked through purchase and is feeding the sales team. Hope that answers the question. So next question, any tips for repurposing webinar or blog content to support both top of funnel and middle funnel goals? Yes, big time. The biggest tip for repurposing webinar content for me is look at the webinar, scan through it, identify what key insights become quotable. Okay. What elements are things that actually add relevant value? And if you can justifiably say that this was a pain point and here's the pain relief and here's how it sold it in the webinar, you then clip that and that just becomes a social post. You have the text underneath it, you have the video, you put some captions into it. And that's going to allow individuals to solve small snackable questions. And it avoids people from sitting in a 45-minute webinar. The other element to that answer, blog content to support both top and middle of funnel. Middle of funnel now is going to help individuals go through things, whether it's assessments, whether it's quizzes, whether it's taking an element of the webinar and then saying, hey, do me a favor. If you've understood that it's important, let's go ahead and have a quiz. You let me know what's effective top of funnel content. And you could kind of create a Tinder style UI to allow, this could be an experience that you create where you allow individuals to take a quick quiz on which content they feel is most compelling. And now that's more middle of funnel. You're getting individuals through. And that could be for any service offering. Next question. If a company doesn't have a big marketing budget, where do you think they should start with top of funnel efforts to get the most value? That's a great question. It really depends on the size of the organization. I think going from local to global, we'll start with local. If you're a local brewery or a local restaurant that you're new to an area and you don't have big budgets, well, the idea is that you want to first start in your kind of local fence, right? If you're a local budget and a local restaurant, you can do local service ads that allow you to have a very small footprint because you're only targeting this small area. You could really tailor your Google My Business profile in a way that is powerful. You can target reviews to get individuals to kind of start coming in. Maybe you can do some sampling events, but also it's just a relevant pace to allow individuals to get to know the team. You don't need huge production budgets, huge video budgets. If you're a brewery, pizza place, restaurant, whatever it is at the local level, or a service provider, just start creating content that you're solving a challenge, right? If you're an electrician and you're coming in and you only do the raw work before the sheetrock's up and before things, or they call it the roughing. If you're doing the rough work, it's a really good example to walk in and say, guys, if you want outlets here, you want light switches here, you want dimmer switches here, you could start solving challenges and introducing who you are. You don't have to have a phenomenal personality for video. It's genuinely about connecting who you are, because who you are is who you're going to sell to. And that's who they're ultimately talking to you at some point. At the regional level, where you're targeting maybe 1 to 3 states without a big budget, leaning in on organic social and creating content, even if you don't have a big budget for design, leaning in to announce to your market to say, guys, we don't have big budgets, but we really feel super valuable about our content. Lean in and tell your audience that design is not going to be something you prioritize. It's all about the value. Most people misrepresent the idea that they have to be the most beautiful designed with all polished posts, etc. That's not true. Sometimes the roughest posts that solve a challenge or let people in behind the curtain are the ones that work best. And then the last is on an enterprise company. If you don't have large budgets, but you have enterprise prospects, and you know you have longer sales cycles, lean into your customers as much as you can. Find the customers that love you, that would pass you forward. And those are the ones that you really find out what they loved most about your offering and why they purchased. And then lean on content and start creating a knowledge base, start creating blogs, start focusing on organic SEO that you could control. Of course, you might need some experts to help you with the nuance, but if you have minimal budgets, control the narrative with content as best as you can. Hopefully that answers the questions. All right, we are 54 past. So if there's any more questions, drop it in. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap here. Thank you so much for the extra time. Thank you for the attendance. We deeply appreciate everything. Appreciate the mind share, the energy, the breath. We will be capturing this. We'll be sending recordings. We'll have it in case you missed it. And like I said, based on the last tip I had, we're going to clip this stuff up and get smaller segments to help. But really appreciate it. In the future, we'll do middle of funnel and bottom of funnel. Any questions, as always, reach out. If you're attending here, you have kind of our website. Reach out with any questions, and we'll talk very soon. Have a great one. Thanks.